So let's back up to the Bryce at the top of the page. So remember that the discussion in the Mishnah that we're dealing with is um, women who are not eligible to drink the Sotah water, and various cases in which the husband still accused them of infidelity or like being loose or whatever you want to call it, but um, but they don't complete the process. And there's also cases in which they remain forbidden to their husbands, but they do not get their ketubah. The way I kind of understand this is that it's their own fault for getting themselves into this mess, and they have no right to demand the support from their husband. Um, so the specific discussion we're talking about is an Ailonis, is someone who, how did we define that yesterday? A woman, it's like it's an irregular genital condition, in which causes her not to be able to have children. And since the promised outcome for the innocent woman of the Sotah ceremonies, V'niksa v'nizrazar, she'll be found innocent and she will conceive. Someone who cannot conceive is excluded. Excuse me, excluded from the ritual. But this was subject to a dispute in the. Okay, so let's start at the end of the second one. Actually, right at the top. Rameir said that a woman who is the pregnant ex-wife of somebody else. In other words, she's remarried, but she's pregnant with someone else's child. Or nursing. They don't drink the water, but they also don't collect the tuba. She was not supposed to get married in the first place. A woman who is pregnant by somebody else is not supposed to marry. Is not supposed to marry somebody who's not the father. So they don't drink and they don't get the tuba. They were Rameir Shahir Rameir, because Rameir's general rule was, you shouldn't marry a woman who's pregnant by somebody else or nursing someone else's child. And if you do get married, it still works. We force you to divorce, and you can never remarry her, even after the pregnancy or nursing condition is gone. The rabbis agree that he should divorce her. But when pregnancy is over or the nursing is over, then he can remarry. Harova, a bachelor, young man, Shanasa Akarus Kana, who married either a barren woman, infertile woman, or an old woman who's beyond the childbearing age. This young man has not already been married and had children. And as we know, it is a mitzvah to have children. Well, Shosavon no tells ksuba, same thing. She doesn't drink the water and doesn't get a ksuba. The marriage is fine because he married this old woman. He can still marry another woman and have children with her. So marrying this woman is not a barrier to procreating. So it's fine. If a husband starts the Sotah process to his engaged fiance, or a Yavama who is waiting for him to take her, to marry her, Umisha Kanasa Nistra. So he gets engaged. He warns the fiance, don't seclude yourself with so and so. Umisha Kanasa Nistra, and then they get married, and then she acts against his warning. She does seclude herself with this guy. Oshosa Olonotelos Kuvasa. She can drink the water. If she refuses to drink the water, no ktuba. Muberis umenika tasma. What about your own wife who's pregnant and your own wife who's nursing? Oshosa Olonotelos Kuvasa. she can drink the water. If she doesn't drink the water, she doesn't get her ketubah. She remains forbidden to him with no ketubah. Harova Shanasa Karus Kana, a young man who marries an old woman or an infertile woman, but he already has other children. Oshosa Olon Ketubasa. Same thing, either drink the water or don't get your ketubah. Eishas Mamzer Mamzer. What about a woman who so mamzer is very restricted in who he can marry, but there are women who he can marry, another mamzer, for example. So if you have a woman who is eligible to be the wife of the mamzer, Eishas Nasin Nasin, it's another category of people who have difficulty finding someone with the right background to marry. Eishas Ger Evan Shuchar, same thing with a wife of a convert or a freed slave, again restricting who they can marry. The Islandese. This woman who is, like I said, has genetic or has genital irregularities. Oshosa all tells ksuba. Same thing. Either drink the water or don't get your ksuba. Katani mi islandis, so that includes the islandis, which we were talking about in our Mishnah, Chushta the Rav Nachman. So this is against the opinion of Rav Nachman, right? Who says that the islandis is not eligible to drink the water, and this Brisa says that she is. Rav Nachman can reply, Tanaihi, yeah, it is against my opinion, but I have other Tanaic support. I hold like the other Tana. What's that source? The Tanya, the Brisa, Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar Omer. Islandis Loshosal tells Ksuba. There it is in black and white. An Islandis does not drink the water, and she doesn't get it. Shanamar. What's the source? As I said before, if an innocent woman drinks the Sotah water, then she is found to be innocent, and she shall conceive. So Misha Darko Hazriya, someone who's able to conceive. Islandis cannot conceive, so she's therefore excluded from the ritual. It seems like a good proof. Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar cited by Rabbi Nachman. How do the rabbis disagree? Explain this first. We need it for this brisa. The next 7 is Razar. Brisa starts out telling us exactly what it's going to interpret. This verse, she's innocent and she will conceive. Even a woman who was infertile, if she has to go through the Sotah ceremony and she's innocent, miraculously, the whole thing is miraculous. Miraculously, she will be remembered, meaning God will grant her conception. Yivra Akiva. So, if that's the case, then it doesn't matter if you're infertile or an islandese. If you drink the water, you're innocent. Miraculously, you'll conceive. In this price, Rabbi Shmuel argues with Rabbi Akiva and Cain. Yisasru koha karos. If that's the case, if you find out you're infertile, what are you going to do? Get yourself into a Sotah situation, remain innocent, right? Go through the ceremony. Presto, your infertility is cured. In Cain, so that doesn't make sense. Like that, you can't interpret the verse that way. And then not only that, will all these other infertile women have a great way to get around their infertility or to defeat their infertility through this, and obviously we don't want to encourage, I mean, the Gemara's view is you don't want to encourage people to get into these situations of Sotah, right? And also the zoo, and this woman who is innocent, Lonistra Hifsida, someone who doesn't play the game and doesn't put herself in a Sotah situation, she won't experience this miraculous conception, so she loses that. So this doesn't make sense that this is what the Torah wants. So how am I going to interpret the verse? So it's not that if you're infertile you'll give birth. It's like your birth process will be eased. If you're a woman who has difficult labors, you'll have an easier labor. If you're a woman who the Gemara presumes wants male children, and you've only got female children, then the Sotah water will give you a male child. Ketsarim Yoleda Sarukas, or if your children tend to be short, uh, then they'll become tall. Shcharim Yeladim Slavanim. If they're dark skinned, then these are all things which clearly the Gemara characteristics which traditionally were, and some would say today as well, were favored, right? To be light skinned, to be tall. But if you had the other kind of children, you'll get the better kind, as it were. That's what the pasuk means. Okay. Eishes mamzer l'mamzer. Back to the brisa that we said before. A woman who is eligible to be the wife of a mamzer, usually meaning another mamzer. She has a choice of drinking the water, or if she doesn't, then she doesn't get her tuba. She's obviously, like, it's a permitted marriage, right? Well, like, no, any woman in a normal case of a married woman, if she refuses to drink the sotah water, at the point where she's already agreed, or whether the ceremony's been, the ritual has been started, then she's not following through on the ceremony to prove her innocence. So then she's still forbidden to her husband, and she's not entitled to collect the ketubah. So isn't that obvious? Like, same thing with a mamzer. Like, why should that be different? I was saying about pushe psulin, like Bushi might have thought, like, let's not make the situation worse, right? Like, if you have this woman who's eligible to marry a mamzer, and now we're going to disqualify her for marrying, we don't want to do that. Maybe we think we want to do that. Kamashwan, Bryce tells you no. Nonetheless, despite that consideration, we're still going to make her ineligible to drink and to prove her innocence. The Bryce also said, Aisha Gerbiav the Shukar of Island. Same thing applies to the wife of a convert or a slave or a freed slave or an islandese. Pshita also is obvious. Like, why shouldn't you do the sotah procedure there? It's obvious that they have to drink. I was the same, because I might have thought Israel Bulgarian. When the chapter of Sotah opens, it says, yes, as it typically does, God said to Moses, "Tell the children of Israel, the people of Israel." The Bulgarian, maybe that, when in this case, when it says "Tell the people of Israel," it comes to include those who are not natural born. So it tells us that not to think that the wife of the ger is also included in the sotah ceremony. So why not? Like, okay, so you quoted me a verse that seems to imply that this applies only to natural born Jews and not to converts. Why don't you follow through? Why don't you agree with that? So Gemara says, it's more verbose than that. It says, tell the people of Israel and say to them, right? So that extra clause is unnecessary. That extra clause comes to include back in those who you might have excluded, i.e. the converts. All right, next part in the Mishnah. Eishes Kohen Shosa. The wife of a Kohen does drink the water. So we're asked, of course, Pshita. Like, obviously, why should she be different from anybody else? I was the same, because I might have thought the Hilon is possible. So when describing, who's subject to this ceremony, it's like if a woman was unfaithful, but the Torah qualifies it by saying not that she was forced. Okay, she was unfaithful willingly, not forcibly. That implies asura if she, that when is she forbidden to the husband, and when do you do the whole sotah thing? When she was not forced, but when she was not forced. But if that's when she is subject to the sotah thing. On nispa muteras, but if she was forced, it would be okay, right? But the case of the woman who's the wife of a Kohen, there's different. The rule is that if a person's wife is raped, then that's not a disqualification for the marriage to continue. However, if the husband is a Kohen, that is a problem. So maybe maybe since the rules are different about the violated woman going back to the husband, and it's not permitted for Kohen, maybe this distinction of having been forced to be unfaithful or not, uh, it's only where there is such a difference that the Sotah thing applies. In other words, not to a Kohen. That's with the wife of a Kohen. It doesn't matter if she was forced or not. So maybe she's excluded from the Sotah thing. The Lashmalan tells us, Mishnah says, don't think that. Okay. Umuteres Labal. If she is innocent, then she becomes permitted to her husband again. They can live together again. Pshitas, of course, is obvious. It's written right there, right? Amar b'misnavna. This is, Rav Huna says what we're talking about is where her health deteriorates. She withers away after drinking the water. So Mar says, how about Maya? What doesn't that indicate her guilt, right? Like, what are you saying? That she's an innocent woman, but the waters made her health decline. So Mar says, no, you're misunderstanding. When the Torah says that, the Torah describes that her belly will explode, or how we translate it exactly, right? But let's say, what if she starts losing control, or her limbs start wasting away? That seems to be a different thing. That seems to be something that would not be caused by the Sotah water. So Marla the same aha zanuya is on you might think that even that is an indication of her guilt. And the reason that she didn't get the usual thing where her stomach swells up, we shouldn't do the onus zanai, because it's a little different. Maybe this woman was, maybe she was forced, maybe she was raped. In that case, she would be forbidden to a Kohen, because as I said before, Kohen, even the wife of a Kohen who was raped, they're still forbidden to each other. Kamash Malon, so the Mishnah says, even though the indication may be, this kind of interpretation of the effects of the water might be that yes, she is still guilty. Nonetheless, it's not the same kind of implication of guilt that would make her forbidden to her husband, the Kohen. What about the wife of someone who is infertile, a man who is infertile? So again, there's no expectation that if she's innocent that she'll get pregnant because her husband is infertile. So maybe she's not subject to the whole ceremony. So more pshita. So the answer is in describing the curse that the Kohen administers before giving her the water to drink, he says, if you slept with somebody besides your husband, right? Love bar this isn't your husband in the fullest sense, because he can't give you children. So maybe we would say that indicates that she's not eligible, right? Because it's only for people who are married in the fullest sense, in the sense that they can both have children. They can both produce children. Kamash tells you that's not the case, and the wife of the Saris is still eligible to drink. And the Mishnah also said, you can do the warning to the woman with respect to all forbidden men. So if I say to my wife, I don't want you to be secluded with your brother, her brother is not permitted to her. But the fact is, any other man is not permitted to her either, because she's married to me, right? So what's the difference? Why would you even have to tell us that so the rules of the Sotah apply to your wife with even someone who's related to her? So my answer is, since the Torah says it's a little verbose in describing how this came about, and the woman was unfaithful, it uses the word nitma, which in this case means unfaithful, twice. One that would permit her back to her husband, and the other to the other man. But in this case, the other man cannot become permitted to her. what I'm saying is they're both. The woman cannot be with either the husband or with the guy who she's accused of being with. But if it's her relative, then she's already forbidden from being with the other guy because of the family relationship. So maybe the whole Sotah thing only applies where both men involved are eligible partners for this woman, aside from the fact that she's married to him. But the case where it's a blood relative, since she was already forbidden to the second guy, maybe that's not the situation that the Torah is describing, and maybe she's not a potential Sotah participant. Kamash 1 tells us that's not the case. Even the Sotah situation can arise even with a blood relative of the woman, being the other man. And Chutz min hakatan, Mishnah said, you can't make your wife a Sotah by warning her to stay away from a minor, right? Because because the Torah said in describing who's this other guy, he's an Ish, he's a man. That implies an adult, not a child. So what are you excluding? Are you really just excluding a minor? What if you want to say it excludes someone who is infertile, a man who's infertile? Shmuel says no. He can be the subject of the Sotah warning, the possible truma. And if that happens, then the woman, if she happens to be the wife of a Kohen, she not only can't sleep with her husband until this is resolved, she can't be truma as well. So the Gemara says, okay, Matanin al Yado Pshita. So first, in looking at what Shmuel says, like Matanin al Yado, you can warn your wife against being secluded with a man who's infertile. What does that have to do with anything? We're not talking about. We're not worried about your wife having children with someone. We're worried about your wife sleeping with someone. Why should this fertility status matter? So the answer is when describing what we're worried about is that another man will sleep with her. It says he'll sleep with her, literally translated here, a copulation of seed. In other words, it could have just said you're accusing her of sleeping with someone, but it's more verbose than that. It says you're accusing her of sleeping with someone. I mean, it comes out better in Hebrew, I guess, but sleeping with someone who has seen it, right? So by adding that, you might think that it only applies to someone who is fertile. This guy is not. So Shmuel tells us, don't worry about that we're not going to take that approach. We're not going to deduce that. You can a woman, if the other man is infertile, then it's still part of the Sotah experience. And then Shmuel says we posted the truma, which is only one of the restrictions. Once the Sotah procedure starts, the woman can't live with her husband, and if he's a Kohen, she can't eat his truma, can't eat any truma. So pshita, that's like the posting of truma is obvious. When the Torah says about the Kohen, that he should not, the restrictions of the Kohen, he shouldn't it's very unclear how to translate that. But in this case, the Gemara is taking the approach, he should not profane his seed among his people, which tells you the Islay Zera Lichalal, that's somebody who's fertile, who has seed. The Leislay Zera Lichalal, maybe the becoming a invalid for the privileges of the Kahuna only applies to someone who is fertile. So Kamash Shmuel says that's not the case. So anyway, what was the point of bringing up Shmuel in the first place? Shmuel said that if the, let me go back to the statement exactly. Shmuel Shachu the kind of the other possible truma. Someone who's infertile, he can be the subject of a Sotah investigation, and the wife can't. If he's the other guy and the wife is the wife of the Kohen, she can't do truma. So doesn't that contradict the Mishnah? So and it all started out with like what is ish excluding? When the Torah says this whole thing applies to the V'shachav Isha, so another man slept with her, is suspected of sleeping with her. So what does man mean? So we already said man is going to mean an adult, not a minor, but we're going through other possibilities. Maybe it means to exclude idol worshippers from the category of man. Now, in the case of Sotah, if the other man is an idol worshiper, it still counts. It's still a good Sotah situation. So just like we did with Shmuel, we're going to take a closer look at what Hamina said. The kind of pshita. So, like, why would you care if he's an idol worshiper? Our answer is since it says the same thing we said before. Since the Torah in describing the incident says she was unfaithful, it says it twice. In other words, once she's prohibited now, once the sort of thing is started to her husband and to the other guy. That only applies where the other man is someone who is eligible to be with her. Since she's already forbidden to the other guy in the first place, regardless of her marital status, saying, well, maybe the sort of thing doesn't apply. Marshall says not the case. The possible truma, and also when says she can't be truma, pshita is obvious, even if the other guy is an idol worshiper. Well, why should that make any difference if she's unfaithful to her Kohen husband? That's why she's not eating truma, not because of who the other guy is. Excuse me. Our answer is not the temo of Baskon Kitieli. When the Torah says a daughter of a Kohen can't marry a strange man, an outsider from the Kuna, the Barhavia, so maybe we're only talking about someone who is like eligible for marriage in the first place, but love Barhabayahu, but below. But if someone who's an idol worshiper, you're not allowed to marry him anyway. So maybe that's not included in the disqualified Kohen wife prohibition. Kohen's daughter prohibition. The possibility of Rabbi So it tells us that he's still this. If the other man is an idol worshiper, then that's still such a situation. And I know this from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi said, Shabbat Kohenes v'al Leviah v'al Bas Yisrael Shep. How do I know that if a wife of a Kohen sleeps with anybody, whether he's a regular Jew, a Kohen, a Levi, an idol worshiper, she's invalidated, disqualified from eating truma? From this verse, a daughter of a Kohen who becomes a widow or divorcee. Someone who's, the whole chapter applies only to someone who this could apply to, someone who could become a widow or divorcee. In other words, you're eligible to marry the guy that you slept with, right? But if it's an idol worshiper, that excludes an idol worshiper and Eved. She couldn't have married them anyway. Therefore, sleeping with them does not disqualify her from truma, which is a little odd, right? It's like you'd think it would be worse to sleep with someone who's outside the fold. But in the case of, because you can understand it, in the case of like who can be a Kohen, we're only concerned about hierarchies within the Jewish people. So Rav Hamina had said, all right, so we understand Rav Hamina. What he said that if the other guy in the Sotah thing is an idol worshiper, then that's not part of the Sotah situation. So what does ish mean, right? So we already, like I said, we know the answer, but let's follow the Gemara. A woman who sleeps with an animal, that is not considered the kind of unfaithfulness that results in a Sotah situation. It's only with a man, right? With ish. Only Rabba me Parzak yellow Ravashi, Rabba from Parzak said Ravashi. You know how Milso Diamabah. Where do we get this thing that the Rabbi says that sleeping with an animal is not considered it's not considered unfaithfulness? The Torah says when in discussing what's eligible to be brought to the temple as a sacrifice, you can't use the wages of a prostitute or the money you got for selling a dog. You can't use that to bring sacrifices. Vitanya, and the Mishnah says Esnan Kelev. What if you switch them? And it's like the money you pay for sleeping with the dog, umachir zana, or the money you pay to buy not a dog but a prostitute. In other words, not to hire her for her services, but to buy her as a slave. Let's say mutarin. That is not excluded by the Torah. The Torah is very specific. Esnan Kelev, the price of the dog. Esnan Zona, the wages of a prostitute, and Mechir Kelev, and the price of a dog, and not the other way around. Shenamar Gam Shneim, because it sums up by saying that both of these, the Torah says, both of these are an abomination, right? Shnayim lo arba. There's only two situations that are the abomination. The specific ones mentioned, and not the other two situations if you switch around the circumstances. So that's the source that sleeping with an animal, while it is forbidden, does not count as unfaithfulness, and therefore is not subject to the circumstance. Okay. So Viela Shikbaz there alone. So why do you have to say about the Sotah? Like we said that so here's the Shmuel has this source that says that an infertile person is not part of the Sotah. It can't be the other guy, right? But earlier today, we said that there was another source for that. That if the other guy slept with her in a way that could produce children, right? So that's redundant now. Like there seems to be two sources for the same thing. Our answer is Mibaile, look at the time. Yeah, what we need it for is as follows. Let's try so. It's referring to something else, not what it seems to be referring to, not sleeping with someone who can produce seed, but it's referring to something else. What's on my davaraka? What are you alluding to that you didn't say? Rav Sheshes answers, when if a man warns his wife not to have anal sex with somebody else. So I think that's what it means. Like Shalokadarka means an unusual way, which I think usually means anal. So that's what Shikla Zera means. So that has nothing to do with the status of the person's fertility, right? That has to do with what kind of sexual act you're performing. If it's something that can't lead to conception, then it's not part of the Sotah story. Amalei Rava, but Rava says, wait a minute, Shlokadarka, Mishkavei Ishaksi. It also says, in forbidding homosexual activity, the Torah says that a Loti Shkav Zachar Mishkavei Isha, don't sleep with a man the way you would with a woman, right? Well, hello, that's obviously talking about anal sex or sex which is not vaginal, because two men, there's no vagina between them. One second. How does this fit in here? And it calls it, the Torah calls it Mishkavei Isha. So the in forbidding male homosexual acts, the Torah says, "Lo tishkav zachar mishkavei isha." Don't sleep with another man as you would with a woman. Well, so doesn't that mean that mishkav, that the act of sleeping together, includes anal sex? Um, so So how can you say that that's excluded from the Sotah thing? That appears to be something that is called mishkav, that is called sex. And if the husband warns the wife not to have that kind of sex with somebody else, then that should qualify. Alamarava for Sotah. Alamarava prat l'shakina la derech evarim. Oh, I know what it is. It's talking about um, not anal sex, but other kinds of sex that are not vaginal. Okay, manual stimulation, perhaps, or let your imagination run wild. I don't know. But so that would not be covered by that. The Torah never calls mishkavei isha anywhere. It doesn't. The Torah never refers to that specifically at all, as far as I know. So if the guy warns his wife not to have sexual contact, even non-vaginal or non-anal sexual contact with somebody else, then that wouldn't count by saying Shichvas Zera, that Sotah only applies to sleeping with the man that would where semen is involved. Maybe it's not including these other kinds of sexual contact, and that's what the Torah is telling us. So Abai objects to that as well. Preaches of the Almahu. What if I tell you not to give? If I tell my wife not to hug somebody else, right? Not to kiss somebody else. That's not unfaithfulness in the sense that the Torah means that produces a Sotah thing. That's just. I mean, she's being loose, but it doesn't rise to the level of the Sotah ceremony. The Torah doesn't forbid that. The Torah is concerned with actual, having sex with somebody who is not appropriate for you because you're married to somebody else. But the Torah doesn't specifically. I mean, you may consider it, bad behavior, and maybe, you could argue that the rabbis certainly see that, and maybe the Torah would disapprove. You could argue that, but it's not what the Torah is talking about when it says don't have sex with another man. So I'm questioning whether that can rise to the level of being part of the Sotah thing. It's not sex. Alam Rabbi, so Rabbi answers, I'll tell you why. Prat l'shakina la b'nashika. We're talking about oral sex. Okay, when the Torah says it's only shikvas zera, it's only the kind of sex that produces seed, that excludes oral sex. Okay, because you can't become pregnant from oral sex. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, so all right, that's okay if you understand sex to mean penetration of a mashika of below kloni, and you would say that oral sex doesn't have any legal status. So that's why the Torah would exclude it from Sotah. But someone who says that any kind of sexual act is included in what is defined as a sexual act, okay? Then, and not necessarily just penetrative sex. Michael Mayer. So how do you explain it? Because if you think that oral sex is sex, then when the husband warning the wife not to do that with another guy should be a valid Sotah situation. My answer is let's go back to Rabbi's answer that he warned her against just bodily contact in a sexual way. I might have thought that, okay, to the husband, this is unfaithfulness, right? Like, sure, the general standard might be, for most people, that might not rise to the level of being unfaithful. Like, you don't want your wife, making out with somebody else, but, that's not the same as having sex with somebody else. But maybe for some people it is, and maybe it depends on the attitude of the husband. Ubal hakafid, and this husband, obviously, if he's saying, "I don't want you making out with that other guy," then and this is a Sotah situation. To him, it's a Sotah situation. Marshall so Torah says, "No, we're not going to make this a subjective standard that depends on each person and the attitudes of the husband. We're going to make it an objective standard, and only sex is sex, and cuddling is not sex. Okay, we'll leave that here for today and pick it up tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Dov. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.